trying a new way to film this as far as the aspect of it. I have turned it to horizontal to see if it will now fill your screen on their video and be easier for you to see. So hopefully this works. Tonight we're going to continue with multi-step inequalities. So no new rules tonight, just a few more extra steps, but nothing more than what we were doing last week with those equations. So mainly tonight I want you to think about this as reviewing and sharpening your skills so that you can feel more confident doing this and have better success. All right? So the first thing we want to make sure we know is, the first thing is solve just like equations. The only change is what? Only difference. The only difference is that you flip the inequality sign when dividing or multiplying by a negative. It has to fit both of those things. It has to be a negative number, and it has to be only when you're dividing or multiplying by it. That's the only time you flip that inequality sign. So let's do an example here. Example, negative 3x plus 2x is greater than 16. All right, so remember with our multi-step inequalities, if you flip back to the multi-step inequalities, the first thing that we do is we combine like terms, or simplify, which means combine like terms. So we need to do that. I have two sets of x's over here, so I'm going to add those together. You have a negative 3 and a positive 2. So when you add negative 3 and a positive 2 together, you get a negative 1x, or you can just write negative x. I'm going to keep that 1 in front of it just so you don't get confused right now. It's greater than 16. All right. So now we have to get that x by itself. And when we do that, we have to divide off that negative 1 on both sides because we have multiplication holding this negative 1 to the x. So to undo the multiplication, we must divide. We divide off the negative 1 on both sides. So an alarm should have gone off in your head. I just multiplied by, I just divided by a negative. Bing, 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 bing. That means you flip that sign. Your sign is now going to be a less than sign. So these cancel out, and you're just left with an x. And then 16 divided by negative 1 is a negative 16. Now, this is very important when you're doing your graphing. It's so much easier if you can get your answer in a variable, then the sign, then the number pattern. So here we have that variable, the sign, which is less than, then the number. Because when we go to graph that, it's in the right order so that we don't get confused. Okay, so it's just less than, so it's open, and we go to the left because it's less than. All right, let's do another one. Negative 4d minus 2d is less than 36. All right, so just like equations, we have to combine these like terms on one side of the sign. So a -4, and a positive D, minus a 2, all right, is, we have to think about our subtraction rules. We keep this one, we flip the sign, and we change that. So now look, we are adding two negatives, so same signs, we add and we keep the sign, so now it's -6. So this is a -6D is less than 36. So now we think, well, how do we get that -6 off the D so the D is by itself? We got to divide by that -6. Bang, 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 bang. We just divided by a negative. We have to flip that sign. Okay, so now we end up with D is greater than 36 divided by -6, which leaves us with a -6. Okay. When we go to graph that, it's already in our variable sign number pattern, so we don't have to flip anything, and we end up with -6, -7, -5. It's open circle because it's not equal to, and it's greater than, so it goes this way. All right. Let's do one where it's not going to be in this same pattern at the end, so you understand what I'm talking about. (20) plus 30x is less than or equal to 36 plus 28x. Okay. So what I just realized when I'm teaching you guys is that whenever I have the ability to manipulate which side the x is on, because remember when there's variables on both sides of the equals of the sign, the inequality sign here, I can choose which side to go ahead and start putting my x's on. So in inequalities, that's why I've always told you it's really important that you decide, it's easier for you if you decide that this is your x side and this is your number side of this equal sign. So we're not going to have one tonight that is like this, but we did yesterday in our homework, and I want to make sure that you guys know it's so much easier to put it in this pattern, variable, then the sign, then the number. So if you end up with something like this, 5 is less than A, flip that around, just flip the whole thing and put A is greater than 5. And that means the same thing. It's just going to be easier for you to graph it correctly. That's what I mean by that. So let's go ahead and do this. Remember, like last week with equations, we want to put all of our x's over here on this side. So let's start by moving this x to this side. So because it's added, we're going to subtract that 28x from both sides. When we subtract it over here, it zeroes out. We're good. Just left with a 36. And over here, we're left with 20 plus whatever the difference is here. 30 minus 28 is a 2x. So 20 plus 2x is less than or equal to 36. All right, so now we need to move this 20 to the number side. He doesn't belong over here on the x side. So we're going to subtract him because he's being added. When we subtract him here, it zeroes that out. Over here, it leaves us with 36 minus 20, 16. Same sign, and then we're still left with that 2x. So finally, the final step is we have to get the 2 off the x. Because it's multiplied and we want to undo it, we need to divide it. Those 2's cancel out, so you end up with x is less than or equal to 8. Now, let's go ahead and graph that. Less than or equal to means shaded in, and it goes this way because it's less than. All right? So just brush up on your multi-step solving rules. Remember, when you divide or multiply by a negative, you flip that sign. And then you graph it. All right? Have a good night.